Okay, so this is a little supplemental PowerPoint, um, narrated PowerPoint to correspond with the last section of the PowerPoint that we've been going over the last few class sessions. This is all part of that PowerPoint that you already had. It's already been posted to Canvas, but for the interest of time, I thought we would do this online so we can start talking about the next section when we meet again in class. And so this is on style models, and I mentioned this a little bit on Friday last time we met, that one of your key roles as a journalist, as a reporter, is to tell an effective story. And so these are just some examples. This is not an exhaustive list. Certainly, there are many different ways to tell a story, but these are just ways that you may think about constructing a story because it does help build a narrative flow into the story that you're creating. The one thing you want to do, no matter how you go about telling your story, is you have to find what I kind of call a main character, someone who is identifiable and relatable to the audience and can help you convey the story that you're trying to effectively tell to the audience. So the first is the altered chronology story. You're telling the story out of order. You start in the present. You typically want to start all of your stories in the present because why is this newsworthy? Why are we talking about this now? And that certainly is dealing with the present. And then you go and you set up the past, the context. Here's what happened. Here's how we got here. Here's some background information to put everything into the proper context. And then you introduce what I call the controversy. And the controversy in this case is usually something that has changed, something that has gone wrong, something that has changed what happened to the people in the package from past to present. Okay, so I use the word controversy kind of as a catch-all, but it could be anything like, losing one's job, a natural disaster, key vote that changed what people can and cannot do. All of these things could be considered part of the controversy. And then you close your package by looking to the future. You don't always have to follow this order, but it is the most common if you are doing this type of story. And so I have examples, all of these, at least the first few of these, I have examples of these on Canvas, actual scripts that are written out. And you can see by reading those examples exactly what I'm talking about. The second model is the diamond model, and I also mentioned this briefly in class rather. This is when you have um, a societal issue or a bigger issue, but you decide to focus on one person or a small group of people who kind of represent what that issue is. So again, we use the example of unemployment. We find one person who has recently been laid off of his job unexpectedly. And he talks about what he's going to do and how he's going to get by and how he's looking for a new job. So you start very narrow with this one person. After 30 years of working at Corning, Bob Smith found out yesterday that he's going to be laid off at the end of the month. That's kind of the narrow beginning of the story. And then you take that and you expand outward, looking at other people who are facing unemployment, looking at the statewide or national unemployment level, talking to economists who are talking about the trends in the economy, talking to business owners who are talking about having to lay off employees because they're not making as much money. Talk to politicians who are trying to combat this or trying to, you know, trying to find a way to overcome unemployment. There's many different ways you could go with this, but the idea is that you start very narrow and you broaden out to talk about the overall societal issue, and then you end back on that person or small group of people that you started with, because it's really all about them being kind of the emotional center of the story that again can make it much more effective and relatable to the audience. The payoff model is not used nearly as much, and it's kind of a gimmick. In fact, the example on Canvas is really rather silly, but it is an example of how you could do the payoff model. This would be more entertainment news or community engagement, soft news, not hard news. You're giving a little bit of detail gradually to create this sense of curiosity. And then you have the big reveal of what the story is really about halfway through the story. And that's pretty much the opposite of how you would normally tell a story. You usually want to be very explicit with how when you tell people this is exactly what this story is about. That's what the story lead is for, right? To tell you exactly what the story is about. So the payoff model, as you'll see with the example on Canvas, which is about a circus elephant coming to town, that's much more lighthearted, engaging news than it is the hard news. So it's just an example that you can use. It's completely up to you. Then we have what I call the just the facts model. And this is basically your breaking news story. This is just kind of here's what happened, here's what happened next, and then here's what we expect to happen after that. And this is a lot of times if you're out covering spot news or something that isn't a major societal issue, something that 24 hours from now is probably not going to be relevant anymore. This is the model that you would use for that. Okay, so I have an example on Canvas that deals with fire, if I'm not mistaken. And finally, we have what is called a NATS package, a natural sound package. Remember, we talk about nat sound being natural sound. And this is a very interesting way of telling a story. And for those of you who don't necessarily want to be a reporter, but you find yourself working in the news business as a photographer or something of that along those lines, and you end up being a video journalist, sometimes they're called a video journalist or even a multimedia journalist. This is a way for you to tell stories without having to be on camera and without having to put your voice on the story. This is basically a package with no reporter narration, no reporter voiceover. And these can be a lot of fun. A lot of video journalists love the opportunity to go out and shoot these things. So, for example, a great one, I remember when we did News 14 years ago, was when the farmers market opened. And it was basically just B-roll of the market, B-roll of all the people showing up, B-roll of all the farmers who were bringing in their stuff, and intercut in that B-roll were sound bites from the various people kind of telling their story, explaining why the farmers market is so important to them, how much they love it when it opens, a certain time of year. I guess it would have been in the spring, right? Another one would be the fair. You go out to the county fair and you shoot video of all the kids in the petting zoo or riding rides or getting their faces painted, and you just have kids talking about how excited they are about the fair. And I had a former student of mine do one on a young lady who was, I think she was 13 and had won some national surfing competition, and she lives in Wrightsville Beach. And it was B-roll of her surfing, and then parts of the other parts were just her telling her story during an interview sitting on the beach. So these can be something that's a really interesting, much more artistic and creative way of going about doing a package. So Nat's package is just another way of trying to effectively tell a story. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to ask, and I'll see you guys in class.